This is Beyond the Truth.
What is up, guys? Brother Sin, Kevin Cernier here. Got a special episode of Beyond the Truth for you today. Had a chance to sit down and talk with a good friend of mine, Brian. Wanted to talk to Brian on the show here for a couple of reasons. One, he's got his own cool little podcast called Your Favorite Blockhead. But more importantly, there were some other reasons that I find Brian very interesting, and some reasons that his story and his life, one, appeal to me, and again, I find interesting, but two, really fall in line with some of the principles of our show, of 8192, The Truth, and Beyond the Truth. Brian is a U.S. Naval military veteran, which is something we've talked about. Both Joel and I are extremely patriotic and very, respectful and thankful for our servicemen, past and present. So that's one reason. Two, Brian has overcome a lot of adversity in his life. So we talked a bit about mental health and overcoming some of the tribulations and the stumbles that he has had in life, some major failures that he had to regroup from and figure out, which path he was going to take moving forward, and how he was going to salvage his life after some of those hurdles and stumbles. So we covered some of that, which again is a lot of what we cover here on the show. Three, Brian is from Texas. I have always had a real interest in Texas and Texans and the whole aura around the Lone Star State. I've had a few friends from Texas in the past that I worked with in different markets. They had been promoted from, different locations. We ended up working in, California and DC together. But there was always something about Texans, and as Brian and I had talked about, you'll hear, I asked him about the thing that, we around the rest of the country always hear, that people from that great state are Texans first and Americans second. So I asked him about that, and I've again always been very interested about that aura that surrounds people from Texas. They seem to have a certain sense of swagger because of where they are, and such a deep pride from where they come from, and it just seems really different than somebody like me who just comes from Ohio. So I really wanted to ask him about that, and with everything that's going on lately with the shootings and so forth, I wanted to talk to Brian because he is a teacher of students of that age, and kind of get a sense of, what he sees as a teacher in the current environment, and, his experience in the classroom and that kind of thing, because we're finding that it's, it is a challenging profession, and, when they're talking about arming teachers and, training them with weapons and making them the first line of defense for the school shootings, it's become a very different role than in years past. So again, that was something that appealed to me, and I wanted to talk to Brian about. And he is also a real deep historian. And to me right now, we're seeing all these things, the younger generation claiming that we're going down the path of fascism, and that the Republicans are Nazis, and that we need to be socialist and so forth. And it's somebody like Brian who can bring a real sense of the truth about what fascism was really like, and what Nazism was truly like, and how big of a failure socialism really was. Somebody that can bring to life the truth in those situations and dispel all the nonsense spouted by this generation. So again, and just another reason, a big part of mental health and, staying positive and being one day in or one day out is faith, a personal faith, a personal guide, a system of accountability, and a system that dictates our way of living. And Brian is a man of very deep faith, and he talks about that and how that impacts his daily life and his world, and how he carries himself through life. So it was just a very interesting conversation for me. I learned a lot about Brian, and again, a lot of topics that I feel really fall in line with the principles of our show. So I hope you guys enjoy the conversation as much as I did, and I think you'll definitely walk away with a sense of appreciation for Brian's story and the journey that he's been on. Because he's not a pro fighter like some of our recent guests, there's still a lot that we can take from Brian's story and Brian's journey. I mean, he's just an average guy like the rest of us, but again, he's battled some things and he's had some experiences that, appealed to me via conversation. And again, I hope you enjoyed as well. So without further ado, here is my Beyond the Truth interview with one Mr. Brian Little of the Your Favorite Blockhead podcast, which can be found on Spreaker and SoundCloud and some other places if you just Google it. Here we go. Mr. Blockhead, are you ready to be put on the hot seat?
You see my head going back and forth. You see me giving the nod of approval. Let's kick this mule. Let's go ahead and drop the bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Let's end this war that we have started, and let's just bring it home, my friend.
Beautiful. This is the modern day version of the Manhattan Project. You are right.
There you go.
So, first question. What makes someone a blockhead?
Well, you know as well as I do, man, that the English language can have 7 different definitions for one particular term. But sometimes things just get taken out of context. Like, for instance, I'm just going to vent for a minute. Ignorance does not mean you are stupid. Ignorant means a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
If we can bring that home for the American public, we'll be breaking some ground. But when it comes to a blockhead, really where it started was not even with Charlie Brown. I'll tell you right now where this whole thing started. It started with the fact that my dad, out of love, always referred to me as his little knucklehead. That is a special, near and dear thing to my heart, because even though we're having fun with it, I ain't nobody else's knucklehead. End of discussion. It is only between me and my dad and nobody else. So I started going through life, I started going, well, if knucklehead ain't going to work, what is a particular gimmick, possibly, that's innocent, that is applicable to my life, that would make some sense? Well, what is America's favorite kid referred to as time and time again by everybody, even those close to him, his worst enemies, his own dog, if you look at the thought bubble, is usually referring to him as a blockhead. And really, he doesn't always deserve that title. But a blockhead, really, if you take it from the comic strip of the Peanuts into modern day context on how it's evolved over time, here's a couple things I can tell you about a blockhead. A blockhead is somebody who will admit that they don't know everything. They will admit that they are learned, but they may not be better or smarter than somebody else in another field. Blockhead is the consistent insult that's hurled at Charlie Brown, and yet he keeps plugging away. It is a non-know-it-all. If you're going to be a blockhead and be on my movement, you better be a non-know-it-all. You better be a lifelong learner. A blockhead is somebody who also understands that history needs to start persevering over political correctness, which continues to win the battle in most of today's society. So once again, history needs to come to the forefront instead of being the redheaded stepchild, and we need to have a renaissance in many things, along with parenting, along with patriotism, along with a faith walk, because we need to stop trying to sell religion to people. So if you take all of that combined into one, you can go back to something that it was supposed to be detestable to be a blockhead. John Quincy Adams was put in his place by his own mother. How dare you even consider becoming a blockhead? But as you know, language will evolve over time. The founding fathers were called liberals, but it means something totally different in 2018. So if you combine all this up together, blockheadism and the human response is just somebody who's willing to be not a know-it-all. You're willing to be learned, you're willing to grow, you're willing to learn from others every single day, you're willing to show humility, but at the same time, you're willing to go ahead and make fun of yourself a little bit. Sometimes you take the power away when somebody else, before somebody can bully you, instead of always having to tolerate it, you kind of beat them to the punch. So why not just join this blockhead movement that I've started here? Anybody that wants to be part of it, and it's not a huge application process. There needs to be more of an application process for somebody who wants to wear a thong in public than there is for somebody who wants to be a blockhead. And that is where I hand it back to you, Brother Ben.
Beautiful. I could not have thought of a better answer. So, I love it. As a self-proclaimed blockhead, then, how have the teachings per se, what makes a blockhead, how has that shaped your personal persona and how you behave? So you've given us your belief of the definition and what qualifies. So how does that shape who you are?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can take this whole blockheadism back to something that I'm realizing at my age right now. I'm realizing that when I start to look at people who are successful, people who I do want to emulate, I'm realizing that these successful people are standing on they're standing on a garbage heap of their own failures. They have failed more often than they have succeeded. And this is kind of me just having my wake-up call and going, look, I don't have to have it all figured out. So really, there's this being stuck in the middle as an only child who wasn't spoiled rotten, who was not allowed to have that entitlement mentality, but also somebody that, I do want to know what it feels to be successful, but I do want to be able to know what it means to be a charitable giver, to be an investor. But that can all go back to a few things. What I'm realizing is that there was a time in my life that I was really low. And the lowest point I have, ironically, is the very age group that I'm teaching to this day. I'm teaching 7th grade Texas history. We have a whole year of teaching how Texas is so daggum wonderful, which I can get to in the middle. There's a lot of good things about Texas, but there's also, I'll pull the curtain back on a few things too. But when you go back to 7th grade, one of the biggest failures that I had that I wouldn't trade anything in the world for, your favorite blockhead, just like Eminem, just like Jim Carrey, just like some of the greatest, was booed off stage at my 7th grade talent show. And I was trying to do the scenes from the movie Liar, Liar. Some people don't appreciate, and the truth shall set you free. It just was crickets across the stage. So it was a tough time for me to have to face my peers after that. But, again, like I said, I wouldn't trade that for anything, because this is another failure I can stand on. As time went on, I did a lot more performances on stage, and I had a lot more respect that came back my way. And another thing is just like, you have to understand, you know this, I am a talker. And I'll tell you right now, I'm starting to realize as I go further and perfect my craft, talkers get really rewarded in a fantastic way, because you can bring home a product or a service better than somebody else. But I'm not trying to hold back on anybody. I showed all of you. That's not really a way to live your life. That's a very toxic, poisonous way to go through life. But I look back at that, and I can pull that one moment in my life when I was hitting low times, and other times I've been there. There's a teaching that Linus Van Pelt brought home for Charlie Brown in the my all-time favorite TV series of, well, not series, but special. There's so many series behind Charlie Brown. But the one that really brought it home for me the most was A Boy Named Charlie Brown. There's a part in the end where Charlie Brown did not, only got second place in the spelling bee, which nobody gave me credit for. He came home to no celebration, no parade of any kind, just his best friend by his side again, going, Charlie Brown, let's move. And the next day he doesn't go to school, and Linus goes and checks on him. And Linus says, I understand how you feel. But as he leaves, he turns around and goes, but did you notice something, Charlie Brown? The world didn't come to an end. So if you take all of that, being able to make fun of myself has given a chance for me to take back the power. I have the power. Has taken back the power of being able to be laughed at, but also just to realize I'm in good company of a lot of people who have failed across the board, who have failed in every way possible. Dave Ramsey said he's so stupid with money he had to do it twice. So if I look at all that and I go, you know what, maybe I'm on the right track with making sure through my podcast, through my blog, through my affiliate sales right now, which are a lot of fun, that I do it with integrity, that I do it with honesty, that I build up trust amongst my tribe, as Seth Godin would call it. And that's really about where all the teachings have brought in. There's always a little something, there's a little moment in these Charlie Brown episodes that have helped pull me through, along with my faith walk, but really it just, nothing else really brings it home more than Charlie Brown, who in the face of adversity is going to persevere every time, is just going to keep on, as I said earlier, plugging away.
Absolutely. No matter how many times Lucy pulls that football, he will try again and again and again and again.
I will go ahead and take care of one misconception right now. I'm going to bring it home to the world. Yes, more often than not, yes, he did miss the ball. He kicked the ball 4 times. In the episode, it's Magic Charlie Brown. Something goes wrong where Snoopy cannot bring him back from being invisible. He was the main attraction. That was the great disappearing act that wrapped up the show. But what happens? He's walking around feeling sorry for himself. He can't find Snoopy, but who does he find? For some reason, Lucy, with her dumb butt, is flipping the ball out there. Well, here's his chance for retribution. He comes and he kicks the ball away from her 4 times until the very end when Snoopy sends the magic spell and in slow motion you watch him miss it. He will never get the credit he deserves. All he's going to get is credit from the 4th wall that doesn't get broken at all in the Pants comic strip. It drives me crazy, but I had to throw that one out there.
Beautiful. So already we're getting some deep insight. But
we're just ramblings there.
But outside of being the head blockhead in charge, leader of the movement,
nice reference to lean on me right there. I like
that's
that.
Right.
The head blockhead in charge. Absolutely.
We still want to know more. So
okay.
Outside of the blockheadism, who is Brian Little?
Oh, well, I guess if we're gonna
as your wife chuckles there beside you, I'm sure she's getting
yeah, quite a little bit. You got from both girls rolling their eyes right now. Behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes. It's all too true. Pulled that one from Bruce Almighty. But if I'm gonna go back and actually have a serious moment with you, Brother Sin, the fact is, like I said, when you look at overall, there's failures, there's successes, but really, who is Brian Little? This is very much a guy who has been stuck in the middle for as long as he can remember. This is not to sound like I have sour grapes or I'm trying to get a sob story out there for the world, but that's what podcasting is. It can be therapeutic for people, or as Barney Fife says, therapeutic. But if you go back further into my time in high school, yes, I was a theater nerd. Chael Sonnen has said himself that actors want to be athletes and athletes want to be actors. Sometimes you're just stuck in the middle, like yours. And really, you're looking more for contentment. So I'm a guy who I call myself a spoiled, rotten only child, but my parents certainly didn't let anybody didn't let me grow up with that kind of mentality. They didn't. But I can tell you right now that often people would ask, well, they'd ask my dad and my mom, how come you wouldn't have more kids? And then my dad would say, well, out of 4, Brian is the only one that survived. And then they shut up. Because if it had all worked out according to our plan instead of God's plan, I'd have been the second oldest of 4. But that didn't happen that way. So I'm a person who, once again, I don't have any older siblings. I don't have anybody younger. A lot of my experiences of life have been through camaraderie, through Boy Scouts, or through maybe things with the band when I was in theater. Also, my time in the Navy was another one, through college experiences. But I'll tell you another companion that I've always had was a tape recorder, because a tape recorder doesn't have any judgment. And so often, whether it was in my house, if I was in my own walk-in closet and I was just practicing with one of those tape recorders that had the roll-up cord that I could put to my mouth and I would just play back over and over again. This is side 2 of the audio cassette. That's very much a part of my life, which is why I appreciate podcasting so much, is that now side 2 of the audio cassette can be out there for the world to hear. Well, and then I go on into college, and there was a time when carrying the handheld recorders was still kind of a cool thing to do. 5% of it was the professor, the other 95% was my own thoughts throughout the day, because I didn't use it for what it should have been used for. But nonetheless, that's just life experiences. So at high school, the only thing you could classify me as would have to be theater nerd, or college. The only way I can answer that is I pissed it away. And I'm going to save the next part for where I'm going with this one, because let's just say the 4 years I did in the United States Navy made up for the 4 months I did absolutely nothing at Abilene Christian University. It's really embarrassing to get that letter in the mail and get that email saying, it didn't say this verbatim, but it did say along the lines of, in the name of Jesus, please leave our university until you can show that you have a little more maturity than the way you're acting. And I admit I didn't get in a whole lot of trouble. It's just I was not going to class. I was partying a lot, and I was just, I treated my freedom, I abused my freedom that I had with college, which happens to so many that get sucked into that life. And so that's where I know that you wanted to get into that discussion about my military, so I'm I'm probably thinking that's a good spot for me to save it for you to bring up that question, because I don't know what your question is going to be. But hey, there you go. From early life to college life, the guy who's stuck in the middle, but also we'll get to how the Navy fell into place. We'll get to that.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue into that question. So you've kind of laid out the groundwork for that question. So you were in the Navy 4 years. You're a veteran. So what did lead you into that choice? What did you take from your time there? If back at that age again, would you would you do the same thing over again?
Yeah, I mean, podcasting isn't perfect. Words are hard. But to answer that question, really, like I said, when you get that message and when you hit that low, also that's the other low. If you're going to talk about the talent show, that's a low. But there's another serious low, because now it's one of those, what are you going to do with your life? And I don't think my dad or my mother actually expected me to go into the military, but it was definitely an option that was on the table. Like now it's kind of one of those, the new Brian needs to start considering going back to a community college, working part-time or something like that. But that was on the list of things I could do, and I went and talked to a Navy recruiter. It's hard to answer that, but back in the day, my grandpa was in the Army. My grandpa was in New Guinea, and he did get some kind of a bronze medal for something he didn't like to talk about. He carried a lot of that to his grave. But I kind of guess it's one of those, you have a moment to serve your country, but also to kind of honor your bloodline, and I felt like I could honor my grandfather by serving. But honestly, I think it's one of those, if he had his choice, he would have said, maybe deep down he's like, well, would you consider the Navy? Yeah, because at a young age, one story that really interested me was the story of the Sullivan brothers. All of them that were killed on the same ship. And, even though I don't have any brothers to share with, there is such thing as brother in arms. But anyway, so I decided to go ahead and enlist and cut weight, but also, I started losing weight because I knew I had 45 pounds to lose, but I actually cut a little bit on that time too to be able to make the weight when I got to MEPS. And then went in 2006, went to Great Lakes, Illinois, did my time there. I consider us the last of the diehards because we were in a berthing that was one of the older berthings from like the 70s or the 80s, didn't have any air conditioning. And they were installing new ones because the basis of boot camp now, I think, as I understand this, is the Navy's trying to make it more ship-like and prepare like how you go to a ship instead of just a regular military berthing. Well, ours was a straight-up all-male military berthing, and we had a CB chief that was over us that I laugh to this day about it because Chief Billman was a very intimidating CB guy to even approach. He had a deep Chicago accent. He was very patriotic. But, he ended up, you like him, but at the same time, he was rough all over. But then finally, when we get to our graduation day after boot camp's over, because boot camp, there's not even really anything to go into for boot camp. You're either going to make it through or you're not. But I get through boot camp and we get to the graduation, and this is where you hear their first names. It was kind of a cool thing for me to hear that this petty officer's first name was Richard, which made sense. Another one's first name was Nathan. I'm like, okay, Nathan Hahn, that one fits. And then they get to Chief Petty Officer Oscar Billman, like, Oscar? Of all the first names, anyway, it was a big moment for me. Another pulling back of the curtain. But anyway, he was playing a role. But, he played it very well, though. And he was definitely very pro-Navy, pro-patriotic. And he was the start of it. But then, I did my time in A school. I'll tell you right now, I had very few choices when I went in because I didn't want to wait. I had to be waiting 6 months, so I went ahead and picked up one of the lowest ones you can pull, but one of the most important. I'll tell you right now, I was a cook. I did my years working in the galley. But I also learned how to do a lot of firefighting and damage control because I wanted to get, well-rounded in the military. And I knew how to work things on different decks. I knew how to stand different watches. I raised the flag several times. I did colors on my ship. One of the proudest moments of my life was doing colors, quite often including doing color duty for when we had December 7th, the anniversary of the attacks on our ship in 2008. That was a big moment for me. But really what I'm getting at is that I took a low position, and that also is something else that brings home a lot of humility for me because I'm willing to work among the lowest of the ranks. And I knew I had an ASVAB score that was way beyond what you needed to be just a regular culinary specialist, a cook on a ship. But it landed me in San Diego. So either way, no matter what the job was, it landed me in a place that still holds a place in my heart. It landed me in San Diego. Got to go to Pearl Harbor 3 times, got to go to Oahu. That was actually my favorite place other than San Diego. Been all around South America. Been all the way through Western Pacific, on into Aqaba, Jordan, into right outside of the gates. In 2008, the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Gates, wanted more Marines in the backyard, so we had to take them to Kuwait. So either way, of all the places that I've seen, I still stand by the prettiest one that I saw other than San Diego was Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. There's something that's majestic about that Pacific Ocean blue as you're pulling into Oahu, and it's just hard to explain unless you see it for yourself. So I'm very grateful for the Navy giving me a chance to see the world, which is mostly composed of water. But still, through all those trips, it's just, that's another thing about it, is that I can tell anybody, if you go into the military, physically demanding, the Marines are the toughest ones. You can just look at their boot camp and go, okay, 13 weeks out there, that's going to be the most physically demanding. But mental-wise, it's definitely the Navy, because you've got time to think about it. You're on a prison in your mind when you are, I tell my kids all the time at school, I'm like, you're going from classroom to classroom. After 8 hours, you're sick and tired of everybody. Imagine 100 days on the water with the same people, and you can't get away from them, no matter what. I don't know how I didn't kill some people on my ship. I don't know how other people didn't kill me for just us being in that confined space. Because like I said, you can't get away from anyone. You're going to see them in the gym. You're going to see them at training. You're going to see them at watch. You're going to see them in the galley. You're going to see them in the mess decks. You're going to see them on different weather decks. You're going to see them at the helm. You're going to run into them anywhere. And so that is just kind of one of those, that when you go on deployment like that, that is one of the necessary evils that comes with being in the Navy. But when you ask me would I do it again, I can tell you right now, if I went back today, yes, I would go ahead and do it again, but there's no reason why I would ever have to go back in and do longer than the 4 years that I did. Honest truth is, I felt like I had served my time. This time I had a chance to go back to college, paid for, as long as I took care of my grades this time. So Lubbock Christian University really was my second chance at getting an education through the post 9/11 GI Bill, which very much came through for me as long as I had the grades. And I did, because this time I had something riding on it. Not just my pride, not just my, and I most of the time this time around, I wasn't going and hanging out with a lot of friends. I was spending time in the library. I was going to the history department. I was spending time with them and going, you know what, this is the realm I want to go into. So being a social studies teacher now, as a civilian, is a way that I feel that I am continuing my patriotism as a veteran, because really what I can do now is, if I can't serve my country, which you feel any need or desire for, I can serve young kids who need to realize that you have it good compared to so many that came before you. These immigrants who built the Erie Canal, that were on the skyscrapers with no safety harness, one false move and they die. These people who built what you live in and what you take for granted, they should not be, their memories should not be pissed away. So in a lot of ways, that's why my patriotism comes out a lot in my storytelling and in my being a social studies teacher today, because of my experiences in the United States Navy on the USS Pearl Harbor.
Beautiful. So it obviously had a very lasting impact on who you are now and shaped a lot of your being. That's awesome. And that's what I wanted to get out of that, because that's one regret that I went to college, I did very well, I did good things, but I'm the first male in my lineage in multiple generations of Cerniers who did not join the military. Some were drafted, and my father went by choice, so that's something that I always carry with me, somewhat of a burden of regret that I didn't do that. So I always often wonder how that would have shaped me, and I love hearing how that affected you.
Yeah, well, and then again, another thing, I would think that, especially what I've heard about your dad and what my grandpa and what I would tell you as a veteran is, look, we came home. We're the ones that are blessed. People did not. So it's nice to know that there are civilians, even if you don't go into the military, there are still things you do as a civilian, as an American, that so many don't do. I'm like, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, we're not saying you have to go and join a branch to prove anything, but we do want you to pay your taxes when you're supposed to. We do want you to go ahead and serve jury duty if you're called. And the most important thing, if you love the military, you go vote. End of discussion. So many people who either had to have an absentee ballot, or people who either want to go to war, want to try to make something work, or just want to come home. We need to get people to the polls and vote. I tell my kids, whenever you go across the stage and get your diploma, there's only one thing I want left from you as a citizen, is to see you one day at the polls voting. Now, I'm not telling you who to vote for. You and I can have that discussion with anybody about what would truly benefit you more if we look at both sides. But the fact of the matter is I just want to see you put your money where your mouth is. So, in a lot of ways, don't beat yourself up for, please don't think that you have to go prove anything in the military. Don't think that we're any better men than you are, but also because the thing is, you still have what employers like. Employers like somebody who can be a proven leader in the military, but also a proven athlete that's willing to put in the long hours and dedication the way you did when it was through your track meets, through your shot put, through your wrestling meets and all that. You still have all that has led you to where you are today, and I just don't think that you have to carry any burden like that. Please don't, because sometimes, honestly, I wonder, I couldn't ask my grandpa if he wanted me to go into the military. He's just one of those, but still something about it made me say, you know what, the Sullivan brothers always resonated with me, and I wanted to give this a try, but I didn't want to make it a career either. So there's a difference between a 4-year serving your term and 20 years. I can tell you right now, when I was not sure about if I was going to get in or get out, I had a guy who was a Master Chief who I truly admire, looked me in the eye, and he said, "Little, get out." I didn't know what he meant at first, but what he was saying was two things. Get out for those who can't, but what he means is, I've never seen a GI Bill this good. If you're wanting to go back and be a student, if ever there was a time for you to do it, this is it. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I honored him too, by just, I know this is a rabbit trail where we were, but I'm just going, I still felt honored by being able to have a second chance as a student too. I went back to college and I took it seriously this time. You took it seriously the first time. So please don't think that that diminishes anything you've done.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned Lubbock Christian. What's it like out there in Lubbock? I've always heard that that's like out in the middle of dust country.
It's at least 3,000 feet above sea level. It's very dry. It's very windy. It's very flat. You have a lot of New Mexico mountain dirt being dropped onto that city time after time. It's not prepared for a giant rainfall, and if it does, I've literally watched when rainfall has come, I've watched a student have to swim from his car to the front, from the parking lot to the front entrance of Texas Tech University. It was being watched by a helicopter. So there is nothing that would make me go, oh, you absolutely must go to Texas Tech. But, LTU was just a small college down the street from Texas Tech, which is the second biggest university in Texas. Only rival is UT, University of Texas in Austin. So hook 'em horns, wreck 'em tech, I don't care. There's a West Texas reality that's out there. But like I said, yes, there's absolutely an Amarillo sky like you wouldn't believe. But it is there is literally a meaning of bipolar Texas weather. It can be this and this, 1 second to another. And some people say, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Oh, I won't even give it 5 minutes. I'm going to give it 5/10 of a second before it changes on you. So, but that's just kind of the truth is that, Lubbock for me and just West Texas, like I said, was a second chance at getting an education. And I'm not saying that it's not a bad place to stay. It is. You just have to remember that there are things that are going to come. I had to explain to my kids out here in northern Texas that what a haboob is, because they don't have a clue. And I'm like, just know that when it's over, you're going to have a bunch of nasty red dirt. You're going to have to clean up your car. And you might have a self-serve car wash that might not be accessible because they have to conserve water because the aquifer is so low. because, you're going to have to pull from West Texas from the underground to be able to make things work. And, nowadays I tell my kids, like, there was a time when windmills were seen everywhere on ranches through West Texas. Now it's wind turbines as far as the eye can see. And it really is a good solution to a problem, to be able to generate wind and be able to use that for electricity and for energy purposes. But they've gone berserk with the wind turbines. You wouldn't, you see them just like, golly, can you make it any windier in West Texas? I think you had too many fans here. But really, LCU ended up being one thing for me. And like I said, I spent a lot more time in the library than anything. I was one of those students who, when you're told to go researching, I was one of the ones that went to the stacks. I would actually go back there and do real research instead of trying to Google it. It drove me nuts. And sometimes when you got into study groups, they weren't study groups, they were social groups. But, I just realized that I couldn't depend on any of those. I had to depend on me, myself, and I. It's all I got in the end, as Beyonce said. And I'm not even Beyonce fan. But I look at that and I go, really, what I got from that is the kind of history teacher that I do want to be. Because the four men that were professors at Lubbock Christian University, I'm going to go and give them a shout out right now. Dr. Owen, Dr. Whitley, Dr. Fair, and Dr. Byers were four of the coolest guys I have ever known in any education setting. And it's just because, one, of how diverse they were and the camaraderie between the guys. Dr. Owen was a very conservative, Republican world history teacher. Dr. Whitley was a very old but pro-Obama American history teacher. There was a nice little balance there. There was one that was very Socratic. That was Dr. Byers. He would ask questions upon questions, and he did it beautiful. But when you think he doesn't know anything, all of a sudden he throws vernacular at you you ain't ready for. So if you think that I sound intelligent on my end, try sit for a little bit with Dr. Byers and just see if you even last. And then when Dr. Fair was the one who was very charismatic, his were the classes that filled up just like that because everybody wanted him. He's fun, he's enjoyable, but he also was very much a Cold War type of American history teacher. He loved talking about the explosive stuff, but when he got to the Cuban Missile Crisis, I didn't want to be anywhere else. I wanted to be learning about Kennedy dealing with Khrushchev at that time. I wanted to know about them being close to nuclear war. So that was another time that I really got into, was just in that era. So if I had to choose what influenced me the most when it comes to just American history, mine would have to either be the American Revolution or the Cold War. I'm not really sure which one, but those are really close. But that's what I take from that, was the men that are history professors that are making me, well, not making me, but assisting me in being the history teacher I want to be, and still striving to be to this day.
Yeah, so that really leads into where I was gonna go next. So it sounds like those four professors were, very important influences on your type of teaching, your style, your all of that. What in general, what was it that drew you initially into wanting to be a history teacher? What is it about history? What made you decide that was your calling? Social studies, history, teaching in general. What triggered that calling within you? And has it been everything you've expected? Has it been more? Has it been less?
Everything I've expected. Oh yeah, I honestly thought that I would be going into class one day and turn into Mr. Clark, and then I would have some teachers I want to go, how can you talk about posturing when you're all bent over kissing postures down the school board? Yeah, there are days I want to live out so many scenes from so many. I mean, 1 minute I could literally be thinking Dead Poets Society, the next thing I'm thinking Stand By Me, and then I could be pulling a what are some other ones? Freedom Riders into one moment of the day. You never know where I could pull stuff from. But honestly, when it comes to just teaching itself, I wouldn't have believed I was going to be a teacher. But I still think that there was this little side of me that wants to work smarter, not harder. From the times I was working on that Navy ship, I started thinking about my mom, who was an English teacher, who was a reading teacher on a 5th grade level for about 10 years. She'd always wanted to be a teacher. So I'm going to go and say tree doesn't fall far from the nuts. I mean, acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, because I took mom's job. I took the torch and ran with it. Because my mom actually did get breast cancer, but she defeated it, but she didn't have the energy to go full time to be a teacher anymore. So I thought to myself, when I got out of the military, I thought, you know what? There's going to be a demand for teachers somewhere. I'm not sure which one it is. And honestly, I was thinking I was going to lean towards English also, but I had a lot more schools. The college that I had gone to before that, Navarro College, which is in Corsicana, and in Waxahachie, Texas, I had spent more time in economics classes and government classes, and I had a lot more of that background. They said, you probably might want to consider going into history, going into social studies instead of English, just because you're a little bit further ahead in that. And I said, that does make sense. So I started thinking, you know what? I think you've got a point. And I started thinking, okay, LCU is also a very pro-education school. There's very much the ministry and there's the education. And most of the time, the standing at the time was 90% of the people who go into education are going to get a job. And I said, I like my chances. So I thought, okay, that'd be a good place to go. But really, deep down in me, there's always been a patriotism in me. I can go back and think when I was in 5th grade, I know very well that when I was doing the school choir program, my quote was, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death, by Patrick Henry. And go figure, a few years ago, I've actually been inside of the St. John's Episcopal Church where he said that. And that is one of the better moments I've had as a teacher, because I scared an administrator so bad you wouldn't believe it. They're walking down, I'm going to have to put you in their shoes for a minute. They're walking down the hall, and all they hear is this going crazy in Mr. Little's room, and he's running like, oh my God, what is going on down there? He swings the door open, and the kids are laughing. He goes, what's going on? And my co-teacher goes, shh, the church was sleeping, and Mr. Henry just took the floor. All I was doing was telling the story of Patrick Henry standing up and saying, forbid it, Almighty God, give me liberty or give me death. And I was telling the story so into it, he thought that I was ripping the kids a new one, but I wasn't. I was just telling the story. That was one of the better days in teaching that I've had. But so as far as teaching goes, yeah, I guess there's some carrying the torch for mom, but also at the same time, I like the idea of being able to have summers, being able to have spring break, being able to have Christmas and Thanksgiving that are uninterrupted, for sure, no matter what. And it was interrupted all the time, whether it was phone calls in the Navy. Even though I might have had leave, sometimes I would still get phone calls over something stupid. I'm like, you know where I am, you don't need to bother me. I guess that's part of me too, is that when I want my private time, I'm going to fight for it. Maybe that's just the inner child in me. She's nodding her head right now because she knows that when I want my alone time, it's going to happen one way or another. But, if you go back to that schedule, I'm like, well, it's honestly not. You talked about this on your podcast that, believe me, teachers really don't struggle that much financially if they stick to a budget. And if you look at the time periods that they've got, that's 10 months of the year, and you've got a for sure 2-month period when you're really getting to enjoy just being yourself and being with your family. So if you look at all that, I notice you're moving around the room. Am I still? A192 keeps on plugging away.
So what I get from it is a self-proclaimed, theater guy. To me, it seems maybe that was a lot of the draw for you into being a teacher, because every day is a performance, especially in history. Especially in history, when you're telling stories, when you're trying to bring history alive. So to me, that's just the second act. Now you're on stage every day.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting agreement from the peanut gallery all the way on that one. Well, like I've been trying to tell people, is that yes, very much when you look at social studies, there are usually 4 categories that come with that, and one of them just stands out for me. There's cause and effect, there's compare and contrast, there is problem and solution. On things like Edison having his solution to the problem, or Andrew Carnegie. Dale Carnegie is the one teaching you how to win friends and influence people. Yes. But Dale Carnegie having a solution to that, and also people like even Joseph Pulitzer, who was able to have a solution for the Statue of Liberty. But but my thing was the narrative, absolutely, because narrative, when it comes to it, the best teachers are the ones that are the best storytellers. And there's a reason why people are intrigued by me, why I see some kids that are in other classes going, Oh, I wish I could be in his class because there's something that I'm bringing home for him that, and that's okay because sometimes you got people in your group that are more technology driven and they're a lot more better in that realm. There's some that are really good at doing project-based learning, and that's fine because some kids do need that. As they say in middle school, as the butt gets number, the brain gets dumber. And in some cases, I have some issues with that as well. But mine is very much bringing home the storytelling because, I've taken the time to have a patriotic side. My interactions with the Boy Scouts of America also, the day I got Eagle Scout was only 13 days after September 11th had taken place, so it was very patriotic. History is always being said by most people that it's boring unless you bring it to life and make it real. There was a kid that went off on somebody in Texas that was saying that if you would just get up and teach instead of handing us a freaking packet, all he was saying is that kids don't learn that way. They need to learn face to face. You can't just expect a kid to get excited over a history book. You got to be the one that goes in and makes it exciting for them. And that's what Dr. Fair was able to do extremely well. Dr. Ohm was able to do it too, but like I said, he was much more into ancient Greece and Sparta. He really came alive during those, and I think during the Punic Wars was one of his big ones. So, sometimes when you get a taste of all history, you really do find which one is, your cup of tea. Because there's going to be so much of it out there, but you can look at which one really draws you in. The one that draws me in is U.S. history. No way around that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that you can tell with teachers. There's some people that do it, I think strictly for the vacation, for the schedule, the 8 to 3, the summer's off, and then there's people that live it. That's truly their passion, and it's very clear to me that that's why you chose that profession. It's a deep-seated passion, and
yes. Absolutely, and I guess before I get you to the next question, I wanted to throw one last quote in there that I want more people to understand. And this isn't coming from me. This is coming from Gordon Wood. If you don't know who Gordon Wood is, you can go back and watch anybody. This is not talking to you, Kevin, but anybody that wants to watch it, go back and watch Good Will Hunting. Take a look at the moment where Matt Damon just puts the other guy in his place for plagiarizing a bunch of other works he found, as he says, obscure passages. But he says something about regurgitating Gordon Wood. And then he said something about the pre-revolutionary utopia and the capital forming effects. Like, that sounds more like Marxian historians to me, because I've looked through the radicalism of the American Revolution. I don't find anywhere where he talks like that throughout the book. But really what he's saying is that the American Revolution was radical. It wasn't really a social like we've seen in history. It's more of a political in many ways. But what I wanted to use was a quote that he used in one of his books, The Idea of America. And it says, history is to a society what memory is to an individual. Well, I've got a very deep, vivid memory that blows people away. So it makes sense for me to be in this realm. I can think in timelines, I can think in dates, I can combine stories that are from this time period to here and bring it into a meaningful story. And that's what he's saying too. It's like, imagine being that guy that's in Memento and is trying to piece everything together from the beginning. That is literally him waking up with no memory. That's what our society is becoming without history. Political correctness is a band-aid on that gushing arterial wound that needs to be fixed with, and it's not going to be it's not going to just be understanding history, but it certainly is a huge component of it that we keep looking the other way and going, well, why are we messing up? Maybe you should take that history book off the bookshelf and dust it off and start bringing this bad boy back to life.
I love it. So you had mentioned earlier about, Texas history and, the good and the bad and the pride of Texas. So something that I've always wondered about, something that I always found kind of comical is, the saying that here in the rest of the country we're always told that, people down in your neck of the woods are Texans first, Americans second. And that's, Texas is more important. That's who you are. So is that a mantra that people truly believe down there? And, if so, how is that felt? How do people, what kind of swagger do people in Texas carry being Texans as opposed to some, boring old dope from Ohio?
Hi, Lloyd. Slow tonight, isn't it? Sorry, that was the face I just made from The Shining. I have to pull that because, like I told you, I'm going to pull the curtain back right now. let's just take a look at one of the mantras of Texas for a minute. Everything is bigger in Texas. There is bigger land. There is a big opportunity. You can look back to Austin's old 300, why people wanted to come to Texas. Very cheap, very fertile land to live out your dream, whether you want to be a farmer or a rancher. So there is a lot of good in Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, including bigger egos, bigger stomachs, bigger attitudes, bigger boisterous voices, bigger appetites for beer. You put it all into one there, and I go, look, it's still, there's going to be bigger this. But however, what I can say is there is a unique story about Texas that just other states just don't have. Now, there is an exception that we can pull if we look at California, which is the other state that was a republic, just not the longevity of Texas. If you look at from the time that we were a republic from 1836, most people know Texas for one thing, and they know it for the Battle of the Alamo. They know it for not stopping until the fighting's done. But the victory didn't take place there. It took a month to get to the Battle of San Jacinto, where we have Sam Houston, where they capture Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna and have him sign the treaties of Velasco, and that's where we start the Republic of Texas for a 9-year period until 1845 to its annexation. So if you take that 9-year period, name another state that has been its own republic for 9 solid years. But the problem is you've got a currency that isn't being accepted anywhere else except in the state of Texas. So Sam Houston knows all too well our butts are going bankrupt unless we join the United States, because that's where the money is, baby. So if you pull all that in there, yeah, we were able to stay for a little while, but if you look at the story from Houston to Lamar to into the time period where we first officially become a state, well, really we needed to. And Texas was no exception on leaving the U.S. as soon as Lincoln becomes president and joining the Confederacy, but we certainly weren't the first. That was South Carolina. They're the troublemakers, quote unquote. Nothing against anyone in South Carolina. I'm just saying, if you look at Calhoun and you have somebody who leads the pack, then you have all the followers, where Texas is a follower too, because they were the 7th one to join the Confederate States. But if you just take a look at, there is a lot of good in the state of Texas. There is very much the spirit of competition, because we want to say everything's bigger in Texas. And we are very much Mr. Friday Night Lights in every way. And more often than not, you end up, anybody in any most lifestyle, you can ask the experts. Most of the time, what drew me back to Texas was the fact that this was still very much my home and my roots. And even if you do go travel the world like I did, which you've even done too, you've gone off on different business endeavors, something is going to make it to where you come back home, and most of the time it's who you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, because she's got her roots that are going to be there too. Because that's not here. So Mrs. Sin is also the same nature of what we're talking about. So more often you end up returning to your home roots at some point in time. But if you want to talk about when it comes to California, yeah, they were a republic, but even today, right now, take a look at how many are flooding Texas out of California. From 10% state tax to no state tax. Texas doesn't have state taxes, neither does Wyoming, but what's up there? Well, never mind, I'm going to stay out of that one. No state taxes, and California is making its way into Texas so fast because the job opportunities are here, because cotton has been king, cattle has been king, oil kingdom. Oh, I mean, come on now. Spindletop took place here, outside of Beaumont, Texas. You got the railroad that exploded across the state, which railroads mean more cities. And most of the time, our biggest cities are going to be along the coastal plains. Houston, Dallas, Galveston is going to be even big too. And we get into how the seawall came to be thanks to the 1903 hurricane. We still have some of the biggest disasters as well. We have a president that got killed right there on Elm Street. And it's one of the biggest conspiracies known to the American public to this day. And that gave a huge black eye to Dallas, Texas for a long time. So, and I look at some things that I'm not thrilled about with Texas. I'm like, wrestling is not revered in this state. It should be, but it's not. Go to Iowa and it's like Friday night football in Texas. Yep. And I'm going, you know what? There are places that are getting the idea. West Texas is embracing it. I just wish North Texas would wake up to the fact, hey, even if you're not going to embrace NCAA wrestling as one of your biggest sports, your football players will be better if you have a wrestling program. You will have kids that are being sent home tired instead of roaming the streets when they could be, if they're not going to be having a basketball game, you can have them putting a singlet on and getting their weight down and go get ready for a match. And West Texas has figured this out. It's just taken a while. North Texas struggles with this concept. But if you add that to it, it's just to bring it all home for you, there's still the good behind it. I can throw 3 songs at you right now when it comes to Texas. And I could do God Bless Texas. I could do so many of them, but I'm going to do 3 of them. I'm going to do all that are George Strait himself. I'm not even going to do Amarillo by Morning. I'm doing If It Wasn't for Texas. Take a listen to the song If It Wasn't for Texas. I wouldn't be an American if it wasn't for Texas. He wouldn't have pursued his dreams in Tennessee if it wasn't for Texas. Whenever he is done with this tour, I'll be somewhere down in Texas if you're looking for me, taking in that big wide open, embracing the summer breeze, kicking back and settling my family. I'll be somewhere down in Texas. And the other one that I can pull is Take Me to Texas, from the actual Texas Rising movie that came out a couple of years back. If you just take a time and listen to those 3 songs, you're going to have that itch inside of you going, man, I want to be in Texas just as bad as George Strait does. And it doesn't get any cooler than him, because me, like me, your favorite blockhead and Bill Engvall, we're 15 degrees off cool. We're nowhere near George Strait's, status of any kind. But nonetheless, if George Strait wants to be here, then why wouldn't your favorite blockhead?
Absolutely. It's always a place I've revered for many of those reasons. Someplace that I actually tried to get my wife to move. We looked a good bit of moving south and moving west to a better climate, and I pushed hard for Central Texas. I had heard great things about Austin and San Antonio and then the weather and stuff like that, the climate and the job.
Austin's a little different. Just know that. Austin, it's got good things in it, but there are going to be people that are going to drive you a little bit bonkers.
Well, don't they say keep Austin weird? It's very diverse.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit out there.
But yeah, and the wide open, my dream for retirement is, big old plantation down in Texas with just a big old open field, and so we'll see. But
yeah, you've got a couple of fans down here that would love to have you, even if it's just a vacation home. Come on. Absolutely. We'll talk to the Saddlebrook Estates out here and see if we can find a spot for you somewhere there out on the outside in the front property.
So we've covered a lot.
Yeah,
so,
mostly because I can't shut up.
So veteran, historian, obviously husband, father, Texan, Christian. How do you pull it all together? What keeps them all present? I guess you got a lot of things going on. You're very diverse. What pulls them all together? How do you interact all of them and keep them all as a very active part of your life? Specifically, the husband, the father, the faith. How do they all impact each other on a daily basis? How do you keep it top of mind, I don't know, I'm not wording it right, but I think you know what I'm saying.
And I because the thing is, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to use my own quote-unquote trinity, or if I'm going to use what I might call my 4-legged stool. So I'm not sure which one it's going to be, because it's going to be either 3 points or 4 points that I bring home. Because the first one I have to say is, my Heavenly Father created me. End of discussion. So the first thing that I've got to focus on is that, even though I appreciate the compliments about, and like to me, people will tell me, they'll go, you're intelligent, you're learned, you're a bright individual, you're articulate, this and all that. And I'm like, guys, the thing is, don't think that I'm putting myself down. I just realize that is a drug that I can become addicted to by letting that get up here. Because the next thing you know, people ain't going to want to spend time with me if you're like, oh, you know a lot of things. And I go, yeah, I know. And it's one of those, I have been given gifts by a good Father. And my faith walk in pursuing God is because every bit of what His Son took on that cross, I should have taken. It should have been me up on that cross. And that is absolutely truth in my heart, in my mind. You can debate that with me all day long, but at the end of the day, my heart says that when my time comes and when I go home, but I have to stand before him and I have my trial, I know that his son is going to be right there, being able to say, you know what, I took that for him. It's been done. It was according to my perfect plan, not my own. But so what I'm getting at here is that religion can start wars, but a faith walk can be yours and yours alone. It is very clear in Scripture, especially in Corinthians, that the man is to be the spiritual head of his household. That does not mean that you are to demean your wife or you're supposed to keep her in her place. Submission does not mean that she is to bow to you. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. It is supposed to be the same mission that you are both on in pursuing your Heavenly Father. Now, is it really my job to make sure that when it's time for Sundays to get the kids up and start getting them ready for church? Yeah, we better be getting. Church is not going to be an option on Sunday or Wednesday. This is a priority, because if we're blessed with this home, we have to, or with our things. We don't own anything in this world. We are managers. We are stewards of what we have been given at this point. This is something I believe. I've been blessed with the opportunity to start doing affiliate sales. I've been blessed with a chance to use a blog and a podcast to write or to share my voice and have this ability to share. But very much this is part of what God created me for. He didn't create me to be Joe Screwdriver. Then God bless the men that are. God bless the men that are going to go out and going to fix something and not talk about it. But there's also people when it's time to get up and speak. Brian, do you mind? You don't even have to ask me twice. I'll be glad to speak on behalf of whatever it's the Running Free Ranch or it's the Brotherhood from my church, whatever the case might be, or if it's speaking on behalf of something in education. Okay, let's hear it. What am I talking about here? But so when I bring all that in, I guess the second thing I wanted to mention is that there is very much a time for, even though you and I can cut up and we can laugh about a lot of things, there is a time to be serious. But people don't want to be serious 24/7. So that's what I'm looking for in my Trinity here, is that I'm going for, you got to have your faith walk, but you also got to have a time where you can rejuvenate. Maybe it's your alone time. Maybe it's your particular hobby. You don't have to be serious all the time. But there's a time for when you're on your employer's watch. Well, yeah, there's a time for you to go close that sale. Yeah, there's a time for me to go deliver that lesson. And whether I agree with the test scores or not, there's a time for me to go perform for them. And there's a time where, if you're fixing somebody's car and they're sitting there for 2 hours or this and that, they should have been only sitting there an hour. Don't waste anybody's time when you are in a free market and capitalistic society. So, but there's a time when, the time for play also is just important as to have time to play as there is to work. You need to have your relaxation. You can't go 24/7. So that's kind of where, I guess, the emotional outlet that I'm looking for in my podcast is for those who have been going through a tough day, but you want to just be able to have a moment with somebody who understands nostalgia, that can go back and have a memory of something, that can tell you a good story, that can keep you entertained. But doesn't have to use a whole lot of profanity or something like that. But that's my answer. That it's just as important to play as it is to work. But the third part of the Trinity that I have to bring in is going to have to be that we can't do it alone. You even though there's times to be by yourself, there's going to have to be times when you are side by side and you lock arms with somebody you share your beliefs with. For instance, in the biggest tragedies we've had in America, that's a time when we locked arms and we were American. Pearl Harbor is attacked, we locked arms, we're all American. JFK is shot in downtown Dallas, we grieve as a nation. September 11th, 2001, we stopped being hateful to each other, we locked arms and said we are American. So united we stand, divided we fall. So if I have to pull in my Trinity here, it would have to be humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and He will lift you up. So the humility is a big thing for me, but that's a big part of my faith walk. The second one is people don't want to be serious 24/7, so be willing to give that emotional outlet to those who need it. And the third one is it's time for us to lock arms. It's time for the Renaissance and patriotism. I'm talking about the Renaissance and patriotism, and not just, but parenting, the Renaissance and being noble men again. So if you tie that in, that's maybe the Trinity I'm looking for. Because really, America has a Trinity too, and Canada has one too. I'm not going to try to compare us to Canada, but Canada has, their Trinity is peace, order, and good government. But let's look at America. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you can find the individualistic side of America versus the community-oriented mindset of Canadians. So if you ever wonder where the contrast is, well, that's one of them when you look back at the Trinity. So my Trinity would have to be amongst those three things.
Oh, that's deep. I love it. You are certainly an onion, sir. Layers upon layers upon layers. I love it.
Overs are not like cakes. Overs are like onions.
Yes. So that's awesome. So we've covered a lot. We've answered a lot of questions that people want to know. We've learned who you are, where you came from, why you do what you do, and in essence, we've learned where your life is taking you.
Hopefully I was just hoping somewhere in there to just light up a big old mouth cannon and walk away laughing. That didn't happen. YFB.
YFB.
Thank you for the few people that got that one.
Yes.
I'm a huge chill mark, just like you are.
The man is brilliant on the mic. You cannot take that from him. So we'll wrap this up. We'll do a 5-question rapid fire to round out the show. So
I like that intense workout before the cool down comes.
Yes. So first one. So we talked about in the first time we got together on your show that I got a lot of favorite TV shows, but people might be surprised to learn that my probably all-time favorite TV show is The Golden Girls. So what is the Blockheads' all-time favorite TV show?
You know, that's kind of really hard to answer a number one thing, because anybody that follows me would know that the TV show would be Peanuts. But if I had to exclude that one just for a second, I would have to go to 5 of them right now that I really have to bring home. As far as 2018, there is no way for me to deny that the Andy Griffith Show will always be one of my all-time favorites, because it's always being played in the background of my house. It was always being showed just in my lifetime. It was background noise as a kid. It's background noise to this day, because there's nothing that's risque of any kind in that one. So I would have to say part of it, you know, if I had to pick just one TV show time and time again, I guess I'd have to pick Andy Griffith Show. But when it comes to the spicier stuff, well, I can't exclude those show about nothing. I've got to throw in Seinfeld in there too. So I mean, so it's really going to be hard for me to pick one of those, because anybody could say I love the old Peanuts, I love the old school Looney Tunes. So I mean, that one right there is a hard one to give up too. But if I had to look back on another 2 favorite shows that just didn't last as long, that kind of didn't make its way into the segues like I hoped that they would, is, you know, the one I have to go back to is, just to give you an example, when I knew as a kid I was different than other people in my class because of the letters that got sent to Santa Claus. Everybody was putting down they wanted crackers in the bed that one year, but I realized at 33, they're doing what kids do in school anyway. They're cheating off each other. But mine said something along the lines of, it really hurts my daddy when he has to spank me, and I'm going in different directions. And finally I said, I want more Transformers fighting. I wasn't a Transformers fan. I was a He-Man and the Masters of the Universe fan. But as far as the TV show, that wasn't what I got into. It was the action figures, it was the comics that came with it, and it was the audio books that I got into. But 2 shows that I was hoping deep down would really kind of take off when I was a kid. One of them was the TV show Mighty Max. And one of the reasons I liked Mighty Max was because of the fact that there was always either a geography lesson or a history lesson at the end. They were always doing world travels. Virgil was very knowledgeable in a lot of the old ancient history and tied it all in for the battles with Norman, and then, you know, Max being a screw-off in school. So that show just didn't take off the way I thought it would, but I always have believed that is one of the better, well-done, artistic shows. So really, I was hoping Mighty Max would be bigger than it was. And another one that I just absolutely loved when I was younger, that I was hoping would still be around, and I still catch myself on my YouTube and on my phone watching this day, is Beast Wars. And the thing behind that one is just because I was digging the voices behind it. Like the guy who did Waspinator was brilliant for that role, but then he tried doing the new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He was Merman, and it just didn't fit. It was terrible for him to play Merman, but he was great. And the same guy played Waspinator, Dinobot, and Rat Trap all at the same time. That's a talented dude. That's the guy who I would love to just have a conversation with at Comic-Con. So if I really had to pick just one, I guess I'd have to go with Andy Griffith. But it's hard for me to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say that I don't appreciate Seinfeld often here. We know that I'm a Peanuts fan, old school Looney Tunes, but really the two that I was hoping would take off more than they did were those two, Mighty Max and Beast Wars. So I really don't know if I can pull an exact one, but Andy Griffith would probably have to be at the top of the list.
Absolutely, yeah. We talked about that before. That's same way in my house. Was my dad's all-time favorite show. He claims, and I believe him, that he can recite every episode verbatim. He's seen them all, watched them all. We've been to Mount Erie every time we'd go to a beach vacation down south. It was always swung through Mount Erie. We'd go to the Bluebird Diner. We've been there for Mayberry Days and everything else. So, yes, it's a huge part of my upbringing.
Absolutely.
So, next one, I think I already know the answer based on what you just said. All-time favorite toy?
Actually, this one you might find interesting. Is that even though I would say that the He-Man action figures were a big part of my life because I had so many of them, honestly, that one doesn't hold as near and dear to my heart as something else, but it is He-Man related. I think I was either 7 or 8 years old, and it is still at my dad's house somewhere in the garage. There is a wooden sword that my dad made for me that was a He-Man style power sword. It wasn't exactly the same, but Dad was very much like I just said, I hate to use the term Joe Screwdriver, I just mean somebody who is a tinkerer, somebody who's willing to build things, and I just don't have that in my genes like he did. I mean, I'm more of the strong back and a weak mind kind of guy. I'll be all brawn, no brain, I got no problem admitting to it. But he actually made this great sword that is somewhere at the house over there, probably out with the umbrellas somewhere in the garage, and that one was very much a special type of toy for me. So, because like I said, the He-Man action figures didn't last too long because I wasn't taking good care of them like I should have, which would have probably brought me millions of dollars on eBay to this day, just like we've talked about in the past too. But another thing is, like I said, every time that I've got He-Man stuff, there's always been a tape recorder somewhere in my history. My first guest that I had from my podcast, Mr. Matt Gill, told me before we did the podcast that when we were in second grade, we had an Easter egg hunt at my house in our backyard because we weren't far from the elementary school. We just walked over there to and from. And somewhere in there, he told me that I brought out my tape recorder and was holding the microphone. I'm like, you know what? I don't remember doing that. Amazingly enough, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's what I did. So I'd have to say it was probably the sword and the tape recorder.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So I don't know if you were a video game guy growing up at all, but if you were, we're both kind of right in that same middle generation. Nintendo or Sega Genesis?
Well, honestly, when it comes to a gamer to the max, I would say no. But somebody who will get in there and play a game, yes. I'm very much an arcade guy who would spend coins like crazy. Absolutely. Got in trouble once for using a $20 bill at an arcade. I can get in that story one day down the road, but I'll save that for another day. Just because I'm wanting to get to this is that I would have to go with what I actually had. Through 6th and 7th grade, I did have a Sega Genesis, and at that time we were trading out games. And the game that I wore out the most, more than anything else, was the 1993 Royal Rumble Sega Genesis. And I was playing more often than not Bret Hart, probably more than anybody else. I mean, there were several of them on there that I would use. I think I used Undertaker here and there. I think I used Razor Ramon doing the Razor's Edge on there. But I think I got irritated with the game because whenever I put them in the sharpshooter, it wouldn't submit them. You'd have to still do a pinfall on it. And I think later games fixed that problem. But the Royal Rumble 1993 was very much a game, and my buddy from next door who would spend the night often, I remember many mornings waking up and he was already on there playing a Royal Rumble match and throwing people out. And I think he, more often than not, that he was Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So y'all would have gone along pretty well after the games. So I have to go with Sega.
Sega. Yeah, see, you're only a couple years younger than me, but I fell right into the age where my first system, I was 5 or 6. I had an Atari 7800, so I was still young enough to have an Atari with the long controller and the knob and the pole position. And then I had the Nintendo.
Yes, didn't own it, but yeah, very
Nintendo, and then Sega Genesis. So yeah, Sega was. I would agree with that as well. So, next one, and again, I don't know if you're a modern cartoon kind of guy, but Simpsons or Family Guy?
Well, honestly, it's one of those, do I embrace either one of them? I can't say that I do, but every once in a while I'll catch clips of stuff, and then I'll have Ms. Blockhead going, will you change that to something else? It makes me a little bit nauseous. But if I had to choose one of them, the reason why I'm going to have to go with Simpsons was simply because of the fact that Simpsons was not allowed in my house, but it certainly was allowed in my best friend Jeremy's house. So when I would spend the night at his house, guess what I'm watching over there? Let's not kid ourselves. And sometimes I'll watch Family Guy and get a laugh out of some things, and I go, okay, if ever there was a line, it was way 10,000 miles back that way when it comes to Family Guy. But honestly, there's nothing that I like about Simpsons was that even though Mom didn't appreciate the show itself, she didn't have a problem with me having a T-shirt or having the cup in the house. So I know for sure I had a Simpsons cup, and I'm pretty sure I had the 2 shirts. I had Don't Have a Cow Man and Give Me a Break. And I appreciated hearing that on a particular podcast on part 2 when CM Punk sat down with Colt Cabana. I actually appreciated what he said about how that he only had 2 legitimate shirts that he wore because he was, a broke wrestler trying to be on the local scene. And he said that he had Don't Have a Cow Man, and he had the the pro-Iraq at the time before Schwarzkopf came up and said the war was over, and then everybody's like, war's over, man. He's like, I don't have anything else to wear. So I definitely got to wear the attire and appreciate that. So if I had to choose one, I'd have to go with Simpsons on only that basis.
Absolutely, and I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, my father was very conservative, didn't allow rap music, didn't allow MTV. None of that was allowed in our house, but he loved The Simpsons. I mean, he used to tape every episode. He embraced that. He thought it was fantastic. So that was a bit of break from character for him. But yeah, we were Simpsons all the way. So last one, you'd mentioned Seinfeld, and we've laughed about that quite a bit. But George or Kramer, who's the better all-time character?
Okay, my personality appreciates both of them, but if you're going to make me pick just one, I think it's just because, it's solidified that Kramer is going to be the well-recognized character out of this, but we very much know that he's got some flaws after what happened with him at that stand-up comic event. I think later on Dave Chappelle made fun of him at the same Laugh Factory. But we see his flaws nonetheless. I see a lot more genuinity. There's 2 things that would make me have to pick George, only on 2 conditions at this point. Like I said, I appreciate both of them, but I have more appreciation for the man himself, Jason Sanders, only because I remember before he ever did George, he did that interesting McDonald's commercial where it wasn't the product that lasted long, but it was the lettuce and the tomato on one side and on the other, and he was just killing that musical number down the street as he's doing the McDonald's song. So I've got to go, I kind of appreciated that story, and there's one moment that just brought home George for me forever because I use it in my house often. It drives Mrs. Blockhead crazy, but you had to have the big sound. So because of those 2, we got to go ahead and just say, you know what, I'm going to go with the little guy. I'm going to have to go with George. And yeah, he actually should have gotten that parallel parking spot. He parked correctly. I don't know where this other guy's coming from, but that's a case that's closed somewhere in New York.
Yes, we are in full agreement there. I mean, Kramer was a great character, but he was definitely more of a slapstick character, the physical comedy. George was just self-centered, depraved, just hysterical in every way. Yeah, George Costanza was in my opinion, maybe the all-time greatest TV character of any show. Just absurd, and
and people say that would, watch Larry David and his interviews and stuff, and people say that would never happen. Nobody would ever react like that. And Larry David, who George is based after, would say that did happen. It was me.
Yeah,
and that's exactly how it went down.
Like, what are you talking about? Go back to the dialect a little bit, man. Worlds are colliding, man.
You're killing independent George. Yes, I completely agree. So, all right. So I think I've taken up enough of the blockheads' time tonight. We have answered our questions. We have dug into the recesses of that beautiful brain that lies inside the head of the blockhead. So, is there anything?
I'll never be the protege of Russell Crowe, but I mean, it's definitely been great. It's as Barney Fife says, it's therapeutic.
Therapeutic every time. Because it's a lot more than just a Charlie Brown and a UFC fan. There's far more to you, and I think people like myself, kind of the average Joe, father, husband, man of faith, we can certainly appreciate, someone like you, and hearing all about it. You've got a great story from your experiences in the military and everything else. So it's just been cool to learn a little bit more about you, and that's what I wanted to get out of this hot seat, and I think we definitely did.
I think it really did. I mean, again, that's kind of the cool part about this is that. As what kids say now on the Real 100 is that I really didn't. You did a lot more of the plan than I had to, but there were still definitely a few talking points you ran through past me, and I appreciate that nonetheless. But one last thing I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to end off on what you've been itching for a while. I'm going to end off on a not really a prelude, but this is going to be my epilogue. This is going to be part 2 of So God Made a Dodo Bird, and on the 9th day. God looked down at his planned paradise and said, I need little bodies that don't realize that there is a gray between you fake and you real. There is actually some in between here. They don't realize that they see it as splitting down the middle. I need little bodies that will think that a glue stick is the equivalent of a push pop. So God made a dodo bird. I need little bodies that will take these little fidget spinners, which I'm going to go ahead and say are helicopter blades, and think that this possibly can de-stress you in the world of compulsory schooling. It's like Chael said, if you are a helicopter, then you stick your arms out and spin around the room until I tell you to land. Well, that's what I need to start doing with these helicopter blades, is let you spin around the room, because you have not elevated out of my classroom. For some reason, you have made your way into my room. So God made a dodo bird. And they are around me. The monsters are due on Collins Street. And there's going to be one half a day I got to get through until 9 days of solitude in the West Texas pasture with the family, getting to enjoy that.
And there you have it, folks. That was my Beyond the Truth interview with veteran, teacher, man of faith, and Texan Brian Little. Until next time, I'm out.